even if you're not able to experience the so-called feeling of lightness and feeling of carefree, feeling that I am the self, at least intellectually, you might be 60%, 70% in track with what you're discussing. And some of you I know have gone back and tried to read some source material, have tried to gather more reflection through your day. But chapter 7 takes a departure there, because in chapter 7, Krishna focuses solely on the supreme reality. It's called Jnana Vijnana Yoga, which is Jnana is knowledge. Vijnana in Sanskrit means wisdom, conversion of theoretical knowledge into wisdom. Wisdom is realization. Knowledge is intellectual knowing, and wisdom is becoming. The being and becoming, right? That's the transition that chapter 7 embarks on. And it's an interesting transition if you lay a moment there. Knowing and becoming are 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 sequential activities. You cannot become something unless you know it. But knowing alone does not deliver the goods. So it's a short chapter, chapter 7, comparatively. It's 30 stanzas as compared to 40 and 50 and 60, and there are some chapters we've seen 75 stanzas and slokas. Chapter 7 is only 30. All all texts all texts all over the world which are more profound in nature happen to be smaller in nature. Even some of our Upanishads, some of the smallest Upanishads are some of the most profound Upanishads. Ishavasa Upanishad or Mandukya Upanishad. Some Upanishads have only 10, 15 slokas, but very profound. It requires a lifetime to understand that short Upanishad. And it's like that. But as a preamble to chapter 7, let's see some of the key takeaways of 6. So even if you've been taking notes, ensure that these are some of the key highlights that you have taken down, even the last 2 weeks, if you have been taking notes. So the first takeaway from chapter 6 is what Krishna declared right in the beginning, that renunciation and performing action are not two different things. They are one and the same. Why? Because perfect action is going out there, being in the field, being in the Gemba. Gemba is the place of action. It's a Japanese word, isn't it? If you've done your Lean or Six Sigma, or if you've worked in operations, you might have heard the word Gemba. Be in the Gemba. The Gamba walk means let's take a walk in the factory, because factory is the place the action happens. So in life, you need to be in the place where action happens. You cannot be secluded. You cannot be recluse. You cannot be isolated from the world. Krishna later calls it a sickness if you're just running away. Why is it a sickness? Because wherever you run, you're taking the same mind with you. So if you haven't renounced the desires backing action, just running away from action leads to frustration. It may initially seem like it's leading to a spiritual path, but that is a spiritual path filled with thorns and frustration, because your desires backing actions are still there. The subtle body still exists. The gross body is unholy to the subtle body, so it doesn't really match up there. So the first thing in the yoga of meditation we realize is that meditation is not running away from action. Meditation is renouncing the motive, the personal take behind every action. Having an impersonal take on action is what a yogi does, which is renounce the personal motive underlying the action, but does what needs to be done. That does not mean you're always, generous. It does not literally mean you're a loser. It means that you do what needs to be done. Your life goes on without you. Not in a negative way again. You ask yourself, what should a person do in the situation? What should a son do in the situation? What should a worker do in the situation? What should a consultant do in this situation? And you do what your intellect already knows as the right thing to do. You've taken away the personal motive backing action. So that's the first important step in meditation. If you're not able to achieve that step, then sitting down and closing your eyes alone does not help us. Because while sitting down and closing your eyes, you might be able to shut down that personal take on life. But the moment you open your eyes, that you still have that doership and personal take on life. And therefore, life becomes hell, either 5 minutes after meditation or 5 hours after meditation. Your mind hasn't changed. So the first lesson, the first five slokas itself, Krishna established that performing actions, being a yogi, and renouncing actions, being a sannyasi, are one and the same. You are a sannyasi with respect to the motive and desire, and you're a yogi with respect to action. So that's the first takeaway. The second takeaway is we saw that, but to renounce desires, to renounce the motive, the personal take on life, we need to control our mind, because our mind springs out of ahankar, ego. It springs out of desires. Now you're saying you should not have a desire backed action. How is that possible? And that's where we saw, how do we quieten the mind? Do we quieten the mind by controlling it, like the yoga system would ask us to do, the Ashtanga yoga, by concentrating, focusing on breath, being tough on yourself, or through the Advaita route of sidestepping the mind, because you're not the mind. Mind is inert. Mind is a matter, just like the body is a matter, infused life through the life principle. Otherwise, the difference between death and staying alive is just whether this body is animated or whether the body is non-animated, isn't it? So similarly, mind is also matter. So we saw that you're not just the mind. So sidestepping the mind is open-eyed meditation. That in no way undermines closed-eyed meditation, which is the yogic meditation, which is for people like us. We're not there in open-eyed meditation yet, isn't it? So we should park that knowledge as the truth, but we should embark in whatever helps us today. So it could be closed-eyed meditation. It could be even meditating, not just on the self, as Krishna says, meditate on me. That we don't know what that meditation is. So we can even meditate on an idol, on a thought, on your breath. Different types of meditation, isn't it? Just pranayama, which is the control of breath, has 1,000 varieties of pranayama you can choose from. Every yogi in India, every spiritual master in India creates a new breathing technique. In fact, I think if you were to qualify as a spiritual master, the first precondition is you have to invent or create your own breathing technique. So you have a lot of options to choose from, whatever works for you. But realize that's not the end goal. Breathing is not for breathing itself. Breathing alone won't deliver. Breathing backed with knowledge. So Ashtanga yoga is a step-by-step process. Asana follows, after asana is pranayama, then pratyahara, which is withdrawal of senses, then comes dharana, concentration, then comes meditation. At that point in time, you can focus on the self. But the step-by-step ladder is something that is offered. Advaita says sidestep the mind. So that's the second takeaway of chapter 6. The third takeaway we saw in chapter 6, which is in chronological order of slokas, is everything in moderation. For a yogi, in a meditative state, these are counterintuitive to the popular definitions of meditation, isn't it? The popular definition of meditation is someone who's sitting in a trance. And if you think of some sages we see in those Amar Chitra Katha and those books as a child you might have read, a sage is sitting in a forest and there's an ant hill that is formed over him because he's he's been in that meditative state for years, and ants have built an anthill around. So all these stories. But here Krishna breaks all that. He says meditation is moderation. You live a life of moderation, you are living a life of meditation. What is moderation? He gives examples of a yogi neither sleeps too much, nor does he sacrifice sleep. Yogi neither eats too much, nor is he ever hungry. A yogi is not trying to prove a point to the world. So why should he starve? Or why should he be a glutton? Why should he or she sleep for 10 hours a day? Why should he sacrifice sleep? So when you know that Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam, from a yogi standpoint, everything happens automatically in moderation. But we can also start with moderation to reach there. That's a reverse engineering, isn't it? So if you are asking yourself in your life, what is the moderation? What are things that I'm doing to prove something to other people, to the world? What are things I'm doing excessively? And how do I moderate it? That also is a good starting point. So that's a third meditative. So lesson in meditation is one, renunciation and action are same, which means you can be in meditation in office. Number two is sidestepping the mind versus controlling the mind. Third is moderation. The fourth takeaway of chapter 6 is, it's a very interesting point on meditation. Meditation consists of two parts. That of assertion and that of negation. What is assertion and negation? Assertion is, see, when I woke up this morning at 5:30 or so, today I don't know why I was feeling extra sleepy as compared to usual days. It may be same for some of you. Sunday morning, though in India it's 11 o'clock, but still it could have been difficult to wake up. So for me, 5:30 was a little difficult. But now I've been used to the schedule, so negating distractions is not too difficult. What is negation? The moment I wake up, I have to negate thoughts which ask me to continue to sleep for 15 more minutes, isn't it? I have to negate picking my phone in the bed at 5:30 and wasting 10 minutes on just apps and messages. And then I have to negate all other thoughts that come to my mind. But there is another easier way of getting up at 5:30, which is, if there's another thought that makes me more excited than the thought of sleeping. That's why you find on the days when you're going for a 20-kilometer trek or a hike, or at that morning, 5:30, you spring out of bed because you're already thinking of that cliff that you're going to walk in. You're already thinking of that rappelling that you're going to do. You're already thinking of that whatever rafting that you're going to do on those holidays. Remember, it wasn't a big deal to wake up at 5:30, because then you're not just trying to negate laziness, you're automatically asserting something else to take that place. So for me, it's a, don't quote me on this, don't hold me to this later, but this morning, suddenly, when I was feeling a little more lazy to wake up, suddenly I thought of the filter coffee, which I've started having in this lockdown. I never used to be a coffee person, but somehow in this lockdown, I've started having filter coffee. And that's what I was sipping, in fact, even during this session. And that's why I'd put the Night King music, because I can go and make some filter coffee for myself. So the thought of filter coffee suddenly got me excited. And then, since I'm used to stepping back and observing what's happening, both in my profession as a leadership consultant, not a trained psychologist, but in the field of psychology, I was observing my own self, saying, suddenly the laziness went off at the thought of coffee. I kept my phone down. folded my blankets and stuff, and sprang out of bed to make coffee. So, chapter 6, last chapter, invited us to do that from a spiritual edification point of view. What do you assert and what do you negate? Now, this is the important part. Negation in spirituality comes through inference and logic. What is negation? How can I be just my body? How can I be just my mind? And I'm not going into every level of logic here. We have been covering that for 6 months. For some of you who might have joined in the recent past, we will cover all of these probably later sometime again. But negation comes with mano buddhi ahankara chitta ninaham, which is how can I be just my body, mind, intellect? I am not my body, I'm not my mind, I'm not my intellect. All those are objects of experience. I am the subject that is illumining the object. So that's negation. What you're not. But just negating body, mind, intellect is one thing. Asserting what you are is the other. However, there's a catch here. You cannot assert the self through inference because you cannot conceptualize what the self means. In Buddhism, it's called shunya. You cannot conceptualize shunya because shunya itself means zero, nothing. You cannot conceptualize the self because the self is beyond conceptualization. Brahman, Atman is beyond conceptualization. Because to conceptualize something, you need the experiencer and the experienced. You can conceptualize your mind because you can experience your mind. You can conceptualize this phone because you can see the phone. So negation is easy. Technically, both are difficult, but negation is easy because you are able to know what you're negating. But so that comes through inference as one of the ways of knowledge in Indian culture. The assertion requires very fine process of saying neti neti. If I am not this, if I am not that, if I am not this either, and if I'm not that either, what else can I be but this? But you can't experience that because the subject cannot experience itself. See, a torchlight can illumine everything, but its source isn't it? A source of light can illumine everything, but it can't find itself in the illumination. Similarly, the self, the Atman, is, according to the Gita, is the subject which illumines everything in its path. But you cannot find the Atman in the illumination because it is the source of all illumination. And that source am I. So that assertion requires a meditative spirit. Because it's easy to assert saying, hi, I'm Aditya. I look like this. This is what I'm wearing. Well, that's just logical assertion, isn't it? But in a spiritual edification process, assertion and negation require two very different branches of cognition. Negation comes through inference. How do you say I'm not just the mind? How do you say I'm not just the body? A small example is through Jnana Yoga. What is Jnana Yoga? Let's take the body for example for a second. You see, your body from your childhood till now has kept changing, isn't it? There are 6 stages to your body according to Vedanta, but we don't need to go into that. But even face validity wise, intuitively, as a young child, you were different. As a teenager, you looked different. Now you look very different. 20 years later, you can't recognize yourself if you look at that picture now. Using the Face app, have some of you tried the Face app to recognize yourself? The Face app is because they want you to download. They've been very kind to create a handsome version of yourself even at the age of 80. But believe me, we may not look exactly like what this Face app tells us. We may be a much 3 steps lesser than what the Face app tells us. Again, Your body keeps changing. We know through science that every 7, 8 years, every cell of your body is replaced. Every cell of your body is replaced. But the feeling of I continues, isn't it? You were there when you were young. You were there when you were middle age. You were there when you were old. That constancy of that I, that constancy of that experiencer, the subject within each of these bodies, that subject does not age, isn't it? The same I or the same experiencer, the feeling of experiencer that a child has, that's not a younger experiencer or older experiencer. The I, the illumining power remains the same, isn't it? Even as you age. That illumining power. Have you heard of the ship of Theseus? Ship of Theseus is also a famous movie. It's originally called Plutarch's Paradox. As a student of philosophy, Plutarch is a very interesting paradox. You can go Google it later. Plutarch's Paradox. It's also called the Ship of Theseus. It's easier to understand, the Ship of Theseus. Ship of Theseus says, suppose there is a ship like the human body. It's a metaphor for human body. Suppose there is a ship. Say the ship is called, give the ship a name. The ship is called ship. If you've been to Goa often, most ships are called, let's call it Santa Barbara or whatever. Just joking. Let's call it just a ship. Now, this is a brand new ship. Say, let's call it, let's give it a name. Let's call it Santa Barbara. Now, suppose 2 years later, you have to replace a particular part of the ship, right? You have to replace the sails, for example. You have to replace the deck. So you take that wooden boardings out and replace it with fresh panels. You take the sails out, you replace it with fresh sails. Now, there comes a point 15 years later where every part of the ship has been replaced. Every part of the ship has been replaced. There is no part of the ship that existed 15 years earlier. What do you call the ship? You don't call it by a different name. You still call it Santa Barbara, isn't it? Just because you've replaced every part. But is there anything about the ship that has to do with the original ship that you called Santa Barbara? No. There is no nail, there is no wooden plank in this ship that is the same as the original ship. However, you continue to call it Santa Barbara. Nobody is going to come put you in jail just because you continue to call it, just because you continue to ask for the same ticket price to get people on a cruise in your ship. They won't say, but this is not the original ship that you advertised. Because if they ask you to prove it, you can't prove it. Every part of the ship has been replaced. However, the ship continues as Santa Barbara. In our own bodies, every cell of our body replaces. But that I continues, isn't it? That I backing it does not age, does not change. That continues. Now the ship of Theseus, just for that, conclude that example. The Plutarch's paradox is interesting because it asks you another question, which is a little brain frying. It asks you, suppose in the period of these 15 years, with everything that you replaced in the ship, suppose you did not throw the original component, right? If you had to replace the cabin planks, you had not thrown that out. You replaced it, but you had stored the old components in a warehouse, for example. And 15 years later, when you replace the last original component in the ship, now you have all the original components in the warehouse, isn't it? Now suppose you reconstruct a ship using all these original components you haven't thrown, you've stored in the warehouse. You have all components, you just do a little tinkering here and there and recreate a ship. Now you have 2 ships. Out of one has suddenly emerged 2. And which one is Santa Barbara? The continuity is in the continuity is in what people call Santa Barbara, which is now a completely replaced ship. In terms of body and components, the reassembled one is the original Santa Barbara, isn't it? Suddenly, if this ship cruises alongside what people are calling Santa Barbara, and you are saying, hey, this is the original, are people going to jump into that instead? I don't know. That's why it's a paradox. So that's not the main point. That's an interesting paradox you can read more about. But these are the questions about the body. The body is but a assemblage of parts, and these parts continuously change. Our own experience of our body changes. Leave alone a stranger seeing us after 10 years, we are unrecognizable. Every at every house, the customary reaction to see children is this, isn't it? You're now so tall and I can't recognize you. So body changes. However, the experiencer does not change. Similarly, the mind also changes. So therefore, I am not the body. There seems to be a constant underlying, all pervading subjectness in me. That Satchit Ananda, the experiencer, as different from body, which is also an object of experience. So I am not the body. The same thing can be applied to the mind as well. See, all of these are actual logical arguments. The way I'm discussing is putting forth the inference. But there are 3, 4 logical ways, scientific ways in which you make these arguments in Vedanta. One of the ways is nityam anityam. What is nityam and what is anityam? Another, which is nothing but what is permanent, what is impermanent. Like an example that we took, the body is impermanent, it keeps changing, but there is a permanence behind it. Another argument is the chit and jada. Jada means inert. In some languages they say, don't be like a jada, don't be like a jadam. At least in Tamil, I know they say that. Jada means is just a lifeless, inert. Chit is sentient. Chit is a consciousness. So if you use viveka, which is the ability to separate real and unreal, discriminative ability that we have in spirituality, you separate the chit and jada, the real and unreal, and you find that the body is jada. The chit is the illumining factor. The mind is also jada. The mind by itself doesn't illumine itself. The mind is illumined by the self. The mind is, even nityam anityam works here. The mind by itself does not illumine itself. It needs the self to illumine. And we've seen all of this earlier. So assertion is the ability to say, I am the self, but it comes through a very strong ability of negation, which is, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the intellect, I am not the ahankar, I am not the chitta. So, because if you cannot negate and you're asserting, you become confused, isn't it? I'm the self, but I also want to be this, I also want to be that. So both are important. So meditation is about assertion that I am the Atman, I am the Brahman. But meditation is, you're able to meditate if you have a strong sense of negation, which is neti neti. And the last point we saw in chapter 6, and all of this are things that are important preamble for chapter 7. Last point is, there is no lost effort. Because Arjuna says, Krishna, you're speaking lofty stuff. What if I'm trying to do all this, but my mind just won't be that sattvic? My mind is highly active. And then Krishna says, as long as you're striving to be a yogi, there is no lost effort. In case you don't dispense your desires, you're out of your bank balance of desires will be the supply that you get. As we saw, just like we go to bed tonight will be our experience tomorrow morning, isn't it? It can't be different from tonight. Similarly, what Vedanta believes is death is a pause. Death is like going to sleep, meaning the subtle body, the desire bank, the vasana bank is intact. So as is your portfolio of vasanas, the desires, so necessarily will be required a supply. So Krishna says, don't worry, as long as you are in the good path, the yogic path, the supply after supply that you keep getting, which is the proverbial birth and death in our, which is taken literally, which is wrong, which is more of a cause effect demand supply. It's actually a supply chain problem, birth and death. So as long there is demand, there will be supply. But the supply will be that supply which takes you closer to your destination, Arjuna, which is reaching the self, liberation, moksha. So there is no lost effort in any of this, even if you're not able to dispel ignorance with a minute knowledge today. So these are all the meditative state, chapter 6 that we discussed. So these are all knowledge that helps sitting in meditation, close-eyed and open-eyed. Let's go to chapter 7.